The air smelled like rain and roses. Joanna Reed stood just outside the lakeside event hall, her heels planted carefully on the cobblestone path leading up to the grand, timber-framed entrance. Her dress was soft gray chiffon, flowing and elegant, chosen after 4 agonizing trips to town and a small fortune at the tailor. She had her hair set in soft curls that morning, 6 a.m. sharp, while the rest of the hotel slept. She wore the pearl earrings Evan had given her for her 50th birthday, back when he still called her Mama Jo, instead of just Joanna. She had paid for all of it. Every flower arrangement wrapped in twine and eucalyptus. Every whiskey barrel turned into a cocktail table. The gold-rimmed plates, the custom neon sign that read, "The Reeds, EST 2025. Even the photo booth with the silly props and floral backdrop, that was her doing. A year of planning, spreadsheets, and careful saving had led to this day. And yet, as she walked into the venue, not a single person looked up. No one greeted her. No one smiled. She clutched the small leather clutch in her hands a little tighter and kept walking. The venue was stunning. White chairs lined up in perfect symmetry on the grass outside, overlooking the lake. Inside, soft music played from speakers tucked beneath silk-draped arches. Guests milled about with champagne flutes, laughing under chandeliers that cost as much as a month of Joanna's retirement income. She scanned the crowd looking for Evan, her son, her only child. There he was across the room near the stage. Handsome in his tailored suit, dark hair slicked back, smile wide and practiced. He laughed as Sophie's mother adjusted his boutonniere, her hands brushing his shoulder like she belonged there. And maybe she did. Sophie's family had always acted like they owned the spotlight. Joanna didn't even try to wave. She approached the check-in table quietly. A young woman with an earpiece and a clipboard barely looked up. Name: Joanna Reed. Mother of the groom, she said gently. The woman squinted at her list, then gave a quick, tight nod. Right. You'll be over here. She motioned toward a side hallway. Joanna blinked. Not with the rest of the family? The coordinator shifted uncomfortably. That area's full. There was a last-minute rearrangement. But it's just through here. Joanna followed the hallway, her heels echoing off the polished floor, her heart slowly unraveling with each step. They passed the kitchen, then turned through a swinging double door. The room was smaller, stuffier. It smelled like marinara and steamed vegetables. A stack of trays rested on a table near the wall, next to a plastic tub of utensils and a cart with a broken wheel. And in the middle of it all, a folding chair. One chair, with a napkin tossed over the seat. Joanna stared. Her mouth went dry. Here, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The coordinator gave a brittle smile. They didn't want any visual clashes with the theme. Joanna looked down at her carefully chosen dress, her manicured nails, the pearl earrings. Clashes, she repeated. It was the bride's request, the woman added quickly. For aesthetic consistency. With the photos and all. Joanna didn't respond. She sat down slowly. The chair creaked beneath her. Her feet stuck slightly to the floor where something thick and sticky had dried hours earlier. She smoothed her dress across her lap and looked straight ahead at a wall of stainless steel and steam. No name card. No welcome. No thank you. Just the kitchen. The swinging door opened and closed again and again, a sliver of the celebration passing in front of her eyes. She could see glimpses of the fairy tale she'd funded. The floral arch, the flicker of string lights, the gleam of champagne glasses. And then Evan, twirling Sophie under the chandeliers. He never looked her way. She adjusted the strap of her shoe. Her hands trembled slightly. A server passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. The air behind the kitchen door was thick with garlic, heat, and the steady clang of metal trays being shuffled into place. Joanna sat still in the corner, her back straight despite the hard edge of the folding chair beneath her. Her soft blue silk dress, chosen to complement the wedding's color palette, was already wrinkled at the waist. She hadn't eaten a bite, but a chipped plate sat in front of her anyway. A single cold chicken breast and 3 roasted carrots growing dull under the fluorescent lights. She glanced toward the swinging door again. Through the small window in the top corner, she caught flashes of the reception, golden lighting, floating candles, the shimmer of sequins and champagne flutes. The music swelled and dipped, matching the rhythm of a perfect evening carefully choreographed for everyone but her. A boy no older than 20 in a black vest and white shirt appeared beside her, holding a half-filled water pitcher. He blinked at her, a little startled to find someone sitting there. Ma'am," he said awkwardly, shifting from one foot to the other. "They said you were supposed to wait back here." Joanna tilted her head, her voice calm. "Who's they?" He scratched the back of his neck. The bride," she said. His voice trailed off as he looked toward the kitchen, then back to the door. Something about visual consistency with the photos she didn't want. He trailed off again, biting his lip. Joanna let the silence do the work. The poor kid looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. "Sorry," he mumbled. "They just said it was better for the theme." "The theme?" Joanna repeated softly. He nodded. Like aesthetic cohesion or something. He tried to smile. "You know how weddings are." "No," she said plainly. "I don't." He didn't know where to look. "Would you like some more water?" "I'm fine," she replied, though her throat felt like sandpaper. He nodded quickly, muttered okay, and slipped away. Joanna looked down at her hands. Her nails had been painted the day before, a gentle blush pink that matched the ribbon in her bouquet, the bouquet she was no longer carrying. She pressed her fingers together and noticed the faintest tremble, a vibration in her wrists, like her body was warning her of a storm she hadn't admitted was coming. She breathed in deeply. The kitchen smelled like overcooked butter, scorched sauce, and something vaguely sweet beneath the tang of hot oil. Not a trace of the lavender perfume she had spritzed on that morning. She had spent 3 hours getting ready. 3 hours smoothing out her hair, picking earrings, double-checking the hem of her dress in the full-length mirror. She'd smiled at herself, trying to believe that this day, her son's wedding, would mean something more. That it would be the kind of day where people said thank you. Where someone might hand her a tissue during the vows or squeeze her hand as Evan spoke about family. Instead, here she was, hidden between a squeaky cart and a rack of empty champagne flutes. She shifted slightly in her seat. The floor was sticky beneath her heels. She glanced at the stain beneath her, brownish, probably gravy, and then at her reflection in a tray stacked against the wall. Her face was too pale under the kitchen lights. Her lipstick faded at the corners. Her eyes looked tired. She pulled the wedding program from her handbag. Cream cardstock, gold foil lettering. The kind of elegant design Sophie had insisted on from the boutique in Portland that only took 3 orders a week. Joanna had paid for them, of course, like she had paid for everything else. She ran her finger across the names printed in curling script. Sophie's parents were listed. Her siblings. The bridal party. The officiant. The photographer. Not a single mention of Joanna. Her role had been carefully deleted. She felt a sudden tightness in her chest. Not a pain, just pressure, like someone had stacked bricks on her sternum and told her not to move. She closed the program and tucked it back into her bag. The door to the reception hall swung open again, and a wave of laughter spilled through the kitchen. She caught a glimpse of Evan spinning Sophie on the dance floor. The lights above them twinkled. He was beaming. Her son. The boy she had raised alone. She remembered him at 8 years old. With a gap in his front teeth and shoelaces that always came undone. She remembered staying up nights with him through asthma attacks, sewing his Halloween costumes, scraping together enough for a used clarinet, when he said he wanted to join the band. She had worked extra hours doing payroll audits just to buy him a decent suit for senior prom. And now, he was dancing with a woman who had seated his mother next to a tray of shrimp cocktail. He hadn't even looked for her. Joanna pressed her napkin to her lips and pretended to dab at a stain. Her throat burned. She told herself it was the onions, the kitchen steam, the heat. Not betrayal. But it was. The door swung again and again, each time revealing more of the life happening without her. The band played a slow song. People clapped. Toasts began. Sophie's mother stood with a glass of champagne in hand, wearing navy chiffon and a string of pearls that probably cost more than Joanna's entire outfit. She gave a speech, full of syrupy sentiment, thanking everyone who helped make this day so perfect. Evan smiled and nodded along. He didn't correct her. No mention of the woman who paid the bills, who filled out the contracts, Who ordered the linens and negotiated the late-night snack truck when Sophie changed her mind last minute? Not a whisper of gratitude. Joanna folded her napkin with slow precision, laid it across her lap and stared at the wall. A fire extinguisher hung on a crooked hook in front of her. Behind it, a smear of peeling paint shaped like a heart if she squinted. She stared until her eyes blurred. That spot became her anchor. If she looked too far past it, she feared she might come undone completely. The speeches kept coming. Joanna stayed frozen in her chair, a forgotten statue among the clatter of trays and the hiss of the dish sprayer behind her. Each voice through the swinging door struck a different chord, warm, rehearsed, all familiar, all wrong. She knew every one of them. Sophie's father with his booming laugh, recalling Emily's childhood fantasies of castles and Prince Charmings. Sophie's mother, oozing with over-rehearsed gratitude. To all of you who made today so beautiful. Evan's college roommate spoke next. Then the maid of honor. Laughter followed every line like punctuation. Joanna hadn't smiled once. She could barely breathe when the groom, her son, stood at the mic. She leaned forward slightly. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of her chair. Evan looked radiant under the soft gold lighting. Polished. Collected. Unrecognizable. I just want to say how incredibly lucky I feel, he began. Sophie, you've made me the happiest man in the world. And to your family, thank you for welcoming me like your own. Joanna's stomach flipped. He continued. To everyone who helped make today possible, thank you. This has been the most amazing day of our lives. That was it. No name. No mention. Not even a glance. Joanna blinked slowly. Her mouth was dry. Her pulse tapped behind her ears. Not once, through the entire day, had Evan acknowledged her. The venue, the decor, the food, the tuxedo he wore, it was all her. And yet, she didn't exist. She looked down at the program again. Her name wasn't there. Not under parents of the groom. Not in the list of acknowledgments. Not even a footnote. Sophie's parents were on every page, welcomes, toasts, even a short bio about their family history and deep love of tradition. Joanna was simply omitted. She flipped the card over. A single sentence stretched across the bottom. With love and thanks to our community of support. A phrase so vague it could include the bartender or the florist's dog. Her throat tightened. This wasn't an oversight. This was erasure. She tried to stand but felt her knees lock beneath her. Instead, she sat perfectly still, feeling a new kind of pain, one made of humiliation, not heartbreak. Through the door came the sounds of clinking glasses. The crowd cheered as Sophie and Evan kissed again. Cameras flashed. The DJ announced the opening of the dance floor. The room roared with movement and celebration. Joanna closed her eyes. She could picture them, twirling, laughing, Evan smiling like he had no idea what was missing. She had imagined this day for years. Not extravagantly. She didn't need glitter or Instagram moments. She imagined a small thank you during a toast. A mother-son dance. A photo of the two of them, framed somewhere in his future home. Some simple acknowledgement of who she'd been in his life. Instead, she was hidden. She thought about the week before the wedding. How she had asked Sophie casually over the phone. Have you figured out where I'll be sitting yet? Sophie had laughed. Oh, we're still working on the chart. Don't worry, Joanna, you'll be included. Included? The word felt sour now. Joanna remembered every small adjustment they had made during planning. No mother-son dance because it would make Sophie's mom feel left out. No speech from Joanna because we don't want too many talking heads. No getting ready photos with Evan because the morning timeline's too tight. Each time she had agreed. She didn't want to be difficult. She told herself it was their day, not hers. But each yes had chipped away a little more of her. Now there was almost nothing left. She looked at her hands, folded neatly in her lap. Her nails still perfect. Her palms damp. She had worked 2 extra consulting jobs last spring to cover the cake and the upgraded string quartet. She had quietly absorbed the cost of every unexpected change, including the last-minute rehearsal dinner at a lakeside restaurant that left her sitting again. This time at a corner table near the restrooms. She hadn't said anything then either. And still, they had placed her by the kitchen. A young server appeared again, A thin girl with a flushed face and sympathetic eyes. "Would you like a slice of cake?" she asked gently. Joanna looked up. "What kind is it?" "Vanilla with raspberry filling." Joanna almost smiled. "Of course it is." She hated raspberry. She shook her head. "No, thank you." The server hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." The girl nodded, paused like she wanted to say more, then turned and walked away. Joanna took a breath, slow and steady. She could hear the sound of forks tapping against plates now. The wedding cake being devoured in the next room. Another tradition that went on without her. A strange calm washed over her. Not peace. No. This wasn't peace. It was clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't about aesthetics or a full table or some vague notion of balance. This was a decision. A removal. A conscious reshaping of the story in which Joanna had been the scaffolding, but never allowed to appear in the final picture. She had paid for the portrait, but she was cropped out of the frame. Joanna stood up, slowly and deliberately. She adjusted the straps of her dress, picked up her clutch, and walked toward the kitchen exit. Her heels echoed with purpose. She stepped outside into the crisp air, letting the coolness hit her face like a slap. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood still for a moment, eyes closed, feeling the sharp Oregon breeze slice through the perfume and sweat and memory. Then calmly she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and opened the wedding planning spreadsheet she'd been building for 14 months. It was all there. Every invoice. Every contract. Every service scheduled for the next day's brunch. She selected 3 vendors. Her fingers didn't shake as she dialed. 3 calls. 3 quiet, professional cancellations. The flowers. The second set for the band. The bar extension through midnight.
No explanaschen.
Just finality. She tucked the phone back into her bag and walked toward the parking lot, her heels crunching softly on the gravel path. Something had shifted. Not shattered, repositioned. The woman who had been erased from the story had just turned the page herself. And this time she was going to write it. Her way. Joanna didn't go back to the hotel right away. She drove. No music.
No GPS.
Just the hum of the car and the rhythmic slap of tires on dark roads. The Oregon sky was heavy with clouds, full of a kind of silence that pressed on the windshield. It wasn't raining yet, but it would. She could feel it in her bones. She had slipped away from the wedding while the music was still playing, while her son was still dancing. Not one person had noticed her leave. Not Evan. Not Sophie. Not even her sister Carol, who had flown in from Arizona and who'd sat happily 2 rows behind Sophie's family without once glancing toward the kitchen. Joanna checked into the hotel lobby with no expression. The front desk clerk didn't recognize her as the mother of the groom. She preferred it that way. Back in her room, she didn't change out of her dress. The soft gray fabric still smelled faintly of lavender and marinara sauce. She sat on the edge of the bed, not bothering to remove her heels. Her purse sat beside her, still zipped shut. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she stared at the TV off, at the mirror across from her, half lit by a cheap hotel lamp. Her reflection startled her. Her makeup had faded. Her hair was flat. She looked like someone who had watched her own story unfold from a distance, and realized she was no longer in it. She reached for her tablet. The spreadsheet came up with a single tap, her neat columns and rows, carefully updated over 14 months of planning. 1 tab for each vendor. Flowers, band, venue, bar, photographer, rentals. Color-coded. Budgeted. Itemized. She scrolled through the notes, the names, the totals. Her breathing slowed. Then she made the first call. "Hi, yes. This is Joanna Reed. I'm calling about tomorrow morning's flower delivery. The post-wedding brunch. I'd like to cancel." A pause. Then polite confusion. "Yes, I understand the policy. No. There's no issue with the flowers themselves. We just won't be needing them anymore." Her voice was clear. Calm. Kind. "Yes, I'm aware there's no refund. Thank you." She hung up. That was one. The second call was shorter. "This is Joanna Reed. We will not need the band's second performance set tomorrow. Please consider the engagement concluded." A startled silence.
No.
"Everything went fine tonight." No complaints. It's just a change of plans. I won't be extending the contract. Click. The third call was to the bar vendor. She spoke to a man named Richie who had been charming during the tasting but now sounded distracted.
Richia, I.
We won't need the open bar extended past 10 p.m. tomorrow, as originally planned. Please cancel the second shift bartender and the cocktail menu. He sputtered something about signature drinks and monogram stirrers. I understand, Joanna said. Please cancel. She hung up and placed the phone gently on the nightstand. 3 calls. 3 cuts. Not revenge. Not drama. Just closure. A door shutting without slamming. She got up and walked to the bathroom. She peeled off her dress with slow fingers, folded it, laid it gently over the back of the desk chair. In the mirror, she looked older than she remembered. But there was a steadiness in her expression she hadn't seen in years. She washed her face, removed the earrings, rubbed the foundation from her cheeks in quiet circles. Then, wrapped in a hotel robe, she sat on the bed, pulled her legs underneath her and opened her phone. 31 notifications. Missed calls from Evan. A message from Sophie. What happened? Did you leave? Everyone's confused. Please let us explain. One from Carol. Joe, are you okay? A voicemail from Evan. Mom, hey? I don't know where you are, but people are asking. You didn't even say goodbye. She didn't respond. She didn't listen to the rest. Instead, she drafted 3 emails. Brief, cordial, unemotional. To the florist. Please cancel delivery. Balance with help per clause. Thank you for your work. To the band. We will not require the second set. Engagement concludes as scheduled. Appreciate your professionalism. To the bar vendor. We are scaling back. Please cancel the late shift. No further services required. She reread each email before sending. Not because she doubted them, but because she wanted to be sure she didn't sound angry. She wasn't. She was awake. And finished. By the time she shut the tablet, the hotel room was quiet again. The fan hummed gently overhead. Outside the window, she could see the lake, still and dark, reflecting the clouds above like a mirror of the day she just lived through. Joanna climbed under the blanket, still in her robe, and lay flat on her back, staring at the ceiling. She didn't cry. She didn't sleep either. But sometime around 3:30 a.m., she felt something subtle shift inside her chest. A lifting. A realignment. As if her ribcage had made space for a different kind of breath. Not sorrow. Not rage. Resolve. And it felt clean. Clear. Like wind through a broken window. The storm had come. But she was still standing. The next morning the hotel room felt too quiet. Joanna sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, her suitcase zipped. The wedding was over. The brunch was cancelled. The phone hadn't rung in hours. When it finally buzzed, she ignored it. Sophie again. And then Evan. She didn't open the messages. Instead she drove. Out of the small town. Past the lake. Through winding roads flanked with pines and tall grass heavy with dew. The drive home took longer than usual, not because of traffic, but because she kept stopping. Once to stretch her legs. Once for coffee. Once just to sit on the side of the road and watch ducks skim across a pond. Her house, when she finally arrived, looked almost too familiar. Like a memory instead of a home. The roses by the porch had bloomed, deep red and defiant. She didn't pause to admire them. Instead, she walked straight inside, dropped her bag by the door, and moved through the rooms as if guided by instinct alone. She ended up in the bedroom. Her dresser creaked as she opened the second drawer. And there it was. A red folder, old and soft at the edges, tucked beneath a stack of winter scarves. She hadn't touched it in years. She hadn't needed to. But now, her fingers moved with certainty. She sat on the edge of the bed, opened the folder, and pulled out the letter. The envelope was yellowed, postmarked from Arizona. The name scrawled in a handwriting she hadn't seen in over a decade. Michael Reed. Her ex-husband. Dead for 6 years now. She'd found the letter 3 weeks after his funeral, and couldn't bring herself to open it then. It had felt too raw. Too loud. He always had a way of getting the last word. Even from the grave. But now, she tore it open with one clean swipe. The paper inside was thin, folded twice. She unfolded it slowly, her hands steady. Joanna, I know you never wanted to hear from me again, but I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago. Her eyes scanned the lines. Daniel, Evan, isn't biologically yours. She stopped. For a moment the room tilted. She closed her eyes. Took a breath. Read it again. I found out years ago. Before we separated. Sophie was pregnant when she showed up, said it wasn't mine. But she couldn't raise a child alone. I didn't know what to do. I told you he was ours. You believed me. You raised him like your own. You didn't deserve that lie. But you deserved the truth. Joanna let the paper fall into her lap. Outside, a bird chirped once, then stopped. She stared at the floor, eyes wide, heart quiet. Not hers. Not biologically. All these years, every scraped knee. Every bedtime story. Every parent-teacher conference. She'd driven across the state for college tours, waited up at night for texts saying he was safe, saved every art project from kindergarten through high school. And he wasn't even hers. She looked back at the letter. There were more lines. More apologies. More explanations. She didn't read them. She didn't need to. The damage was done. Or maybe it had been done decades ago. She had just kept building something whole over a hollow place. She folded the letter, returned it to the folder, and placed it gently on the nightstand. Then she stood, walked to the window, and looked out over her backyard. The patch of grass where Evan had played soccer with his friends. The fence she'd painted by hand when he turned 10. The garden bed where he buried a time capsule she never had the heart to dig up. She thought of every moment. She had passed the test. She had mothered a child not her own. And loved him fiercely, completely, without ever holding back. And when the time came for recognition, for simple dignity, he had left her behind. Tucked her away. Pretended she didn't exist. She felt no tears now. Only truth. She walked back to the dresser, pulled out a small box and added the red folder to it. On top, she placed a photograph, Evan at 4 years old, sitting on her lap, holding a toy truck, both of them smiling like nothing had ever been broken. She closed the box. Labeled it History. Then she placed it in the hall closet. She didn't lock it away. She didn't hide it. But she didn't carry it anymore either. She made tea. Sat by the window. And when the sun shifted across the kitchen tiles, she knew something inside her had changed. Not just broken. Rebuilt. She found it by accident. The second letter. The red folder hadn't seemed particularly full, but as Joanna was returning it to the hall closet, something shifted inside. An edge barely noticeable, tucked into the back lining. She paused, opened it again, and there it was. A single sheet of paper, folded without an envelope, thinner than the first, and dated 3 days before Michael's death. Her breath caught as she read the first line. If you're reading this, I guess the first letter reached you. The handwriting was the same, slanted, messy, impatient. But there was a gravity to this one. A weight she felt before her eyes reached the middle. Daniel wasn't just someone else's son, it said. He was never supposed to be yours at all. Joanna sat down slowly on the edge of her bed. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath. When Sophie left him at my door, she was 18. Scared. She didn't want to keep him. She begged me to take care of it. Adoption. Something clean. Something distant. But I couldn't. I didn't have the heart. I couldn't give him away. So I told you he was ours. Joanna closed her eyes. He wasn't even a mistake from their marriage. He was never meant to be part of her life. A child placed on a doorstep, abandoned by one woman, lied about by another, and still, she had held him in her arms like he was hers from the beginning. He had been a secret, and she had been the one to make him real. The letter continued. I don't know how you'll feel reading this, but I hope you understand that if I did anything right in my life, it was letting you be his mother. Not because you had to, because you chose to. She read the last line twice. You were the only person strong enough to love someone who never truly belonged to you. Joanna lowered the letter to her lap and stared at the carpet. The silence in the house felt different now. Not hollow, honest. She thought of all the times she'd whispered to herself during Evan's teenage years. I'm doing the best I can. Now she knew. She hadn't just done her best. She had done the impossible. She had loved without blood, without biology, without expectation of reward. And even though the wedding had erased her, even though Evan had stood at the altar without acknowledging the woman who raised him, he had still been shaped by her hands, her rules, her resilience. She stood up, walked to the living room and looked around with fresh eyes. The framed photos, the report cards taped to the fridge once upon a time, the shoe rack still holding his sneakers from high school. She saw it now for what it was. Not a monument to a shared past. A museum of sacrifice. She walked to the hallway and began taking things down. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. She wrapped the pictures in tissue, folded the old soccer jerseys, boxed the childhood trophies with care. She labeled each box with a Sharpie memories. Not obligations. When she was finished, the house looked bare, but not empty. It looked ready. Later that afternoon she made herself lunch. A real lunch. Not a sandwich over the sink. A grilled cheese with sharp cheddar and tomato soup from scratch. She plated it, sat at the table, and ate in silence. She remembered something Sophie had said once. At a family dinner. "I just love how Joanna's always so accommodating. Nothing's ever a problem." She'd smiled then. Now the words felt like a velvet-wrapped dagger. Nothing's ever a problem. Because Joanna had never been allowed to be one. She finished her lunch, cleaned the kitchen, and sat down at her desk. She opened a new document and titled it, "Things I Want." She stared at the screen for a long time. It had been years since she'd asked herself that question. The cursor blinked. Finally she typed, "Dinner with people who see me. Music in the house again. A photo on the wall because I like it, not because it reminds me of duty. A life that doesn't require permission." She saved the list. Printed it. Taped it to the refrigerator. The woman who had once built her world around a child she hadn't chosen, had now chosen herself. And this time, she wouldn't be erased. It started with an impulse. Joanna was wandering the aisles of the local market when she saw them. Sunflowers. Big, bold, and unapologetic, their golden faces turning upward beneath the fluorescent lights. She put a bunch in her cart without thinking, without asking who they were for. They were for her. She hadn't bought flowers in years. Not for herself. That same day, she picked up heirloom tomatoes, fresh basil, a wedge of Parmesan, and a bottle of wine that didn't come from the clearance bin. She came home, cleaned the kitchen while humming softly under her breath, and opened the windows. The breeze that moved through the curtains felt like something new, light, forgiving. She made pasta that evening. Real pasta. Lemon butter sauce with roasted garlic and cherry tomatoes. She plated it carefully. Lit a candle even though no one else would see it. Poured a glass of wine, even though there was no one to toast. And she sat down at her table. Just her.
No folding chair.
No tray of shrimp. No swinging kitchen door. She didn't rush. She didn't check her phone. She didn't ask herself if someone else was okay before she took her first bite. The food was good. But the feeling was better. It was the first meal she had eaten in years that hadn't been about someone else. The next day she wrote invitations. Not formal ones. Not gilded. Just notes on thick stationery she found in a drawer. The kind she used to reserve for thank you letters that never got sent. She invited 6 people. Claire from the hospital, who once smuggled cupcakes into the break room for her birthday. Mr. Henderson, her retired neighbor who always shoveled her sidewalk in the winter. Dina, the clerk at the used bookstore who recommended novels based on what Joanna looked like she needed, not what was trending. Nurse Janet, who stayed late on her own anniversary shift so Joanna could attend Evan's school play. And 2 others from her walking group. Widowed women who laughed too loud and never apologized for it. She wrote, "Dinner. My place. No special occasion. Just because." She mailed the notes. Not a group text. Not a calendar invite. She wanted it to feel deliberate. The day of the dinner, she woke early. She swept the porch. Washed the good plates. Ironed a tablecloth she hadn't used in a decade. Blue with sunflowers. She made bread. Real bread. Let it rise while she cleaned the living room. She made a salad with roasted beets and goat cheese. She slow-cooked the chicken. She sliced lemon wedges into perfect slivers and chilled the wine. And then just before they arrived, She changed into a linen blouse and soft cotton pants. No Spanx. No heels. No makeup unless she felt like it. She felt like it. When Claire was the first to arrive, holding a bottle of Merlot and a bouquet of wildflowers, Joanna smiled so wide it surprised them both. "You look amazing," Claire said. Joanna laughed. "I feel like myself." The others trickled in. Mr. Henderson brought cinnamon cookies. Dina brought a book. Nurse Janet brought stories. Everyone brought laughter. They ate at the table that once held science fair trifold boards and PDA forms. Now it held glasses of wine second servings, napkins folded into little fans. There was no seating chart. No theme.
No επάλεγη.
Halfway through the meal, Dina leaned back and sighed. "This is the best night I've had in months." Someone raised a glass. To Joanna. She lifted hers too. To being seen. After dessert, peach cobbler she made with too much cinnamon, but no one complained. They moved to the porch. Sat under string lights she'd hung between the beams that morning. Lights she bought because they made her smile, not because they matched anything. They told stories. Some funny, some heartbreaking. They shared too much wine, and not enough regret. Claire clinked her glass. To the kind of woman who reminds us it's never too late to take your seat at the head of your own table. Joanna didn't cry, but her throat tightened. Because for the first time in a long time she felt not just alive but real. She wasn't the woman from the kitchen anymore. She wasn't invisible. She had made the table, set the places, lit the candles. And she had invited people who saw her, not because of what she gave but because of who she was. When they left that night, with leftovers and hugs and warm hands clasped around hers, she stood at the door and watched the lights of their cars disappear down the street. She didn't clean the kitchen. She didn't rush to put the chairs away. She just stood there in the quiet, the warm air wrapping around her shoulders like approval. She had spent her life setting the stage for other people's happiness. But tonight the spotlight had shifted, and for once it was hers. The knock came just after noon. Not loud, not hesitant, just steady. Like someone who knew she was home and wasn't going to leave without saying what they came to say. Joanna stood in the hallway. Barefoot. She could see his silhouette through the frosted glass. Evan. It had been a week since the wedding. 7 days of silence on her end. 7 days of unraveling on his. She opened the door slowly. He looked the same, but not really.
No suit. No glow.
Just jeans, a wrinkled t-shirt, and dark circles under his eyes. Mom. She didn't respond. She stepped aside. Silent. He entered with hesitation, looking around like he expected to see his picture on the wall, and noticed they were gone. Every photo of him had been taken down. Every frame empty. "Where are the pictures?" he asked quietly. She ignored the question. "Seat." He obeyed, sinking into the armchair across from her. The same chair he used to climb into as a boy to read with her on Sunday mornings. Now the room was still. Clear. "I didn't come to fight," he said finally. "Good. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I don't understand what happened. 1 minute everything was fine, and the next you're canceling things and posting checks on Facebook." Joanna raised an eyebrow. "That's what you're confused about? The Facebook post. You embarrassed us." "Did I?" He looked away. Joanna stood, walked into the hallway, returned with a box. She set it on the coffee table. "What's that?" "Receipts," she said. "Every single one. From the last 14 months. Every florist call. Every dress fitting. Every rental. Even the second dance floor you insisted on." He didn't reach for the box. Then she pulled out the letter. The one from Michael. She handed it to him. He unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the page. Confusion crept across his face. Then understanding. Then something sharp. Shame. "You knew." "I do now." He swallowed hard. "So you're mad because I'm not." She cut him off. "I'm not angry because you're not biologically mine. I'm angry because I raised you. I poured everything I had into you. And when the moment came for you to honor that, to honor me, you let them shove me behind a kitchen door and said nothing." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "You watched it happen, Evan. I didn't think." "Exactly. She stood again, picked up an empty frame from the mantel. "This used to hold your kindergarten graduation photo," she said. "You had a missing tooth and marker on your shirt. You ran straight off the stage and into my arms." She flipped it face down. "I'm done holding on to versions of you that no longer exist." He flinched. "Mom." "No," she said, her voice low but steady. "I'm not your backdrop anymore. I'm not your bank. I'm not your afterthought." He looked at the floor, jaw clenched. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Too little. Too late." She pushed the box toward him. "These are yours now. Every receipt. Every reminder of what I gave while you looked the other way." He didn't move. She walked him to the door. He paused. "You always said I was your whole world." "You were," she said. "And now I'm finally mine." She closed the door. The house was warm with laughter that night. Real laughter. The kind that fills a room and makes your chest ache in the best way. Joanna had invited the same group back again.
No ekatzen.
Just joy. They passed bowls. Told stories. Mr. Henderson had everyone crying with a tale about locking himself out in his underwear. Claire brought wine and raised a toast to the women who finally take their seat at the head of their own table. Joanna clinked glasses with a steady hand. Later, in the quiet of the kitchen, she smiled as she washed dishes. This was her life now. Not defined by obligation, but by choice. Evan never called again. She didn't need him to. The people who mattered were already there. She woke the next morning to birdsong and sunlight. Peaceful. She made coffee. Sat on the porch. Her robe flapped softly in the breeze. The roses were in full bloom. The kind of wild bloom that doesn't care for permission. She wasn't someone's shadow anymore. She was the woman who lit the candles, who poured the wine, who rewrote the ending. And finally it was enough.